Today, we're jumping into the incredible story of Subhas Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army. We're talking about a revolutionary force built for one single powerful purpose: to free a nation from colonial rule. Now, that's not just some dramatic line. At the absolute height of its power, the British Empire saw this one man not as just another politician, but as a genuine, fundamental threat to its very existence. Why? Because he was a revolutionary who was actually willing to build an army and fight back. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How did one man, Subhas Chandra Bose, or Netaji, as he was famously known, actually manage to shake the very foundations of British rule? Well, the answer isn't just about winning battles. It's about an idea that turned out to be more powerful than any weapon. So let's get right into it with the empire's greatest fear. This is the story of a man who looked at the situation and decided, you know what? Diplomacy isn't going to cut it. Freedom had to be seized, with an army built from the ground up. So where does a story like this even begin? It all starts with a pretty dramatic choice: to completely turn his back on a life of comfort and privilege within the British system, and instead walk the much harder path of a rebel. And you can really see the fork in the road he faced right here. Look, Bose was absolutely brilliant. He passed the Indian Civil Service exam, which was basically a golden ticket to power and prestige. The expected path was totally clear. You serve the empire, you live a good life. Instead, he just rejected it outright. He chose a life of rebellion. And that right there became his guiding principle, his North Star. For Bose, there was just no room for compromise on the goal of complete, total independence. His philosophy was simple: any path that led to a free India was a path worth taking, period. Of course, this kind of rising influence made him a huge target. After he formed his forward bloc to rally his supporters, the British decided he was way too dangerous to be left free. So, in 1941, they put him under house arrest, thinking they could silence him. They severely underestimated his resolve. What happens next sounds like something straight out of a movie. It was one of the most audacious escapes in modern history. He just slips out of his house in disguise and goes on this insane, perilous journey across continents. He even traveled by submarine. And he did it all to seek alliances with Britain's enemies. This wasn't just an escape, it was a mission to build an army. So now that he's escaped, Bose moves on to the next phase, forging an actual army. He was no longer just a fugitive. He was basically a head of state in waiting, ready to build the institutions of a free India, all from exile. So over in Southeast Asia, with support from Japan, he establishes the Azad Hind, a provisional government for a free India. From there, he revives the Indian National Army, the INA, mostly by recruiting from Indian prisoners of war. Their mission was singular and absolutely electrifying: march to Delhi and liberate their homeland. And this became his ultimate rallying cry. It was such a powerful, uncompromising call to action that just resonated so deeply with people who had started to lose hope. He wasn't promising an easy path, not at all. He was demanding sacrifice for the ultimate prize. And beyond the battlefield, Bose also left a lasting cultural legacy. He popularized the greeting Jai Hind, which means victory to India. And it's a phrase that just cut across all regional and religious lines. It's still used today. Okay, so the government's in place, the army is ready, the battle for India began. The INA, fighting alongside Japanese forces, launched this incredibly daring campaign to enter the country right through its eastern border. And the INA saw some really intense action. They fought in the brutal jungles of Burma and in the now famous battles of Imphal and Kohima. These were not symbolic skirmishes. We're talking about hard-fought, bloody battles against Allied forces. And this was a moment that captured their symbolic power. For the first time in literally centuries, an Indian army, fighting under an Indian flag, had liberated a piece of Indian soil. Hoisting that tricolor in Manipur was a moment of immense pride, a powerful signal that the dream was actually becoming a reality. Okay, so this brings us to the central paradox of the whole campaign. Militarily, on paper, it was a failure. The INA was eventually pushed back by torrential monsoons and a crippling lack of supplies. But its psychological impact was a massive, resounding success. The British were just plain shocked by the fierce loyalty and the fighting spirit of the INA soldiers. And this wasn't just the fear of losing another battle. No, this was a much deeper, sort of existential fear about the future of British rule in India itself. And this was the terrifying question that began to haunt the British leadership. Their entire empire in India was held together by hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers. The INA proved that this loyalty could no longer be taken for granted. If that sentiment spread, well, the empire would be completely indefensible. So that leads us to their enduring legacy and the really fascinating question of how a military defeat could actually turn into a huge catalyst for independence. Bose himself disappeared in 1945. His death, in a reported plane crash, is still a subject of a lot of debate. And tragically, he would not live to see the very freedom he fought so hard for. But his actions had already lit a fire that couldn't be put out. The story of the INA sacrifice spread like wildfire across India, inspiring a whole new wave of resistance. This even included the huge Royal Indian Navy Mutiny of 1946, an event directly inspired by the INA's example. And this is the perfect definition of a psychological victory, right? The INA may have lost on the battlefield, but they absolutely won the larger war for hearts and minds, fatally weakening the British will to keep fighting, to hold on. And that's the crucial takeaway, really. The INA proved that the very foundation of British rule, the loyalty of the Indian soldier, was broken. And once that was gone, the end of the empire was pretty much inevitable. And so we end right back where we started, with this paradox. The story of Netaji Bose and the INA is just a powerful reminder that history is never simple. It shows us that sometimes the path to a nation's freedom is paved with what looks, at first glance, like a defeat.